When a mother and daughter both become pregnant by the same man, a man old enough to be their grandfather, the entire village is shaken. But the darkest truth is not who the father is. It is why no one dared to speak until now. Everyone in the village thought they knew this family. But one night, a secret was uncovered that silenced every mouth and froze every heart. A mother and daughter, carrying the same blood from a man they never chose. What happened next was something no one could ever forget. They were judged. They were blamed. But when the truth finally came out, the village realized the real monster was the man they respected the most. This is a story of a silence that broke a family and awakened an entire community. Love, betrayal, and a truth buried under fear. A mother fighting for dignity. A daughter fighting for a future, and a village that must face what it tried to ignore. Listen closely, because once this truth is heard, it cannot be unheard. Do not blink. Do not look away. Because this story is not just about shame, it is about survival. A mother and daughter standing at the edge of everything they once believed, and a decision that will change an entire bloodline forever. The rain came early that season, drumming softly on the thin metal roof of the house where Mai and her mother, Lynn, lived. Their village was small, tucked between rice paddies that glimmered like broken mirrors on the gray sky. People whispered there. Whispers travel faster than the wind. Mai walked slowly along the muddy path, her hands resting over her stomach. Her breath was heavy. Her world felt tight, as if every sound and every glance carried weight. She did not look at the neighbors. She did not answer when they called her name. She simply kept walking, her heart pounding like a trapped bird. Inside the house, Lynn sat silently near the window, her face pale and still. She too held her belly, though her hands trembled more than her daughter's. Her eyes were distant, as if she were looking at something far away, something she no longer had the courage to face. The air between them was thick, heavy. Unspoken words floated like smoke, filling every corner of the room. The man at the center of everything was not there. He was never there. Mr. Huey, a wealthy elder in their community. His face was wrinkled, his eyes small and calculating. His footsteps and voice had always carried a strange authority, a quiet but unwavering threat. For years, the village respected him. They bowed when he passed. They smiled even when they disliked him, because he held the money, the land, the influence. The dead had begun small, just a loan for medicine. Mai remembered the night her father coughed blood, the fear in her mother's voice, the desperate prayers whispered into the cold night. They had gone to Mr. Huey because there was no one else who could help. He had smiled slowly, as though he already knew what would happen. The debt grew, the kindness twisted, the promises became chains. There had been no violence, no loud threats, no dramatic scenes. Just pressure, just a quiet tightening of control, a slow erasing of choices. By the time I understood what was happening, it was too late. Her mother was already bound to him, and she was drawn in the same way, not by love, not even by desire, but by fear, confusion, and the heavy weight of obligation. Now the village stared. Now the whispers rose like crows circling above. How can a mother and daughter both carry the child of the same man? Shame, disgrace, sin. The words dug into my skin like thorns. Yet no one asked why. No one asked how. No one offered a hand. They only pointed. Mai turned to her mother then. Her voice was soft, but it trembled with something raw. Mother, when the day comes, what will we say? What will we tell them? Lynn's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes glistened, not with ordinary tears, but with the weight of years of silence. She finally whispered, her voice fragile. We will tell the truth, not to them, but to the children, because they must grow without shame. Shame is something others place on us, not something we must carry forever. The wind outside howled, bending the bamboo trees. The room felt smaller, as if destiny itself pressed its hand upon the house. Mai felt a cold shiver crawl up her spine, not from fear, but from the realization that their story had only just begun. The village would not forgive. Mr. Huey would not release them, and the world would watch them unfold like a wound that refused to close. There would be consequences. There would be reckoning. There would be a day when silence would no longer protect anyone. And that day was coming, closer than anyone knew. The days that followed were colder, even though the season was slowly turning toward warmth. It felt as if the sun refused to enter the house where Mai and Lin lived. The windows stayed dim. The floorboard seemed to creak more than before, as if the house itself was uneasy. Every morning, Mai went to fetch water from the well, and every morning she felt eyes on her, the quiet judgment of neighbors who spoke only when they believed she could not hear. Yet she heard everything. She walks like she owns a village now. No shame at all. He will choose one of them in the end. The other will be thrown aside. Mai gripped the bucket harder. Her knuckles turned white. The truth was far more complicated than anyone would ever try to understand. It was not pride that made her walk with her chin raised. It was simply the last piece of dignity she had left. Inside the house, Lin rarely spoke. She sewed quietly or stared at the mountains beyond the rice fields. Sometimes her eyes filled with tears, but she did not wipe them. She simply let them fall until her face felt empty again. One evening, when the light was faint and orange, a knock echoed on their door. Slow, firm, measured. Mai froze. Lin's needle slipped from her fingers and clinked against the wooden floor. She already knew who it was. When the door opened, Mr. Hui stepped inside, without waiting to be invited. His expression was calm, almost gentle, as if nothing in the world was unusual or wrong. He placed a basket on the table. Medicine, tea, tonic herbs. My children must be healthy, he said. The word struck Mai like a slap. Her breath quivered, but she forced it steady. Lin remained silent, her eyes lowered. Her shoulders were small and tired. Mr. Hui's gaze shifted slowly between them. No affection, no guilt, only possession. He spoke softly, with the confidence of someone who believed his actions were unquestionable. The council will gather soon. People are speaking too loudly. I will handle it. But both of you must present yourselves when I call. Do you understand? Mai did not respond, but her silence was already an answer. When he left, the room felt suffocating. The door closing sounded too final, too heavy, as if sealing something that could not be undone. Mai stepped outside into the fading light just to breathe. The fields shimmered gold and green as the wind passed through them. Birds drifted across the sky, returned to nests where they did not need to fear judgment or shame. She wondered what it must feel like to live without a story tied to suffering, without whispers, without eyes that followed her every step. She walked toward the old tree near the riverbank. It was where she used to play as a child, where she and her mother once laughed together, back when life was simple, back when the future felt safe. Mai touched the tree bark with her fingertips. Rough, solid, unchanging. Mai. Her mother's voice approached softly from behind. Lin stood there, the evening light outlining her figure. Her eyes looked older than her age, eyes that had known more sacrifice than most people could imagine. I need to tell you something, she said. Mai turned slowly. Something in her mother's voice felt different, a quiet urgency, a truth ripened too long in silence. Lin took a step closer, her voice trembling so faintly it was almost unnoticeable. You believe I accepted him because of debt, but that is not the whole truth. There is more you must know, something that began long before you understood anything, something that will decide everything that is coming. Mai felt her heartbeat slow, deepen, anchor itself to that single moment. What do you mean? Lin looked away, her face shadowed. I stayed tied to him because he holds something of ours, something we lost, something we cannot afford to lose again. Mai's breath caught. What did he take? Lin did not speak immediately. She closed her eyes, gathering strength she had not used in years. Then she opened her mouth to reveal it. But before the words could form, a sound rose from the village. Shouting, urgent voices, a crowd gathering. Someone was calling their names. Mai and Lin turned toward the noise. The moment of truth hung suspended, unspoken, unfinished, waiting. The world held its breath. The shouts in the village grew louder, carrying the sharp edge of urgency. Voices layered over one another, rising, clashing, echoing across the rice fields. Mai and Lin exchanged a look, and in that moment neither needed to speak. They both understood that whatever was about to happen would no longer allow their silence to shield them. They walked back toward the heart of the village. The air felt heavy, as if the wind itself was listening. As they drew closer, they saw a crowd gathered near the council house, torches flickering in the coming darkness. Faces they had known for years stared back at them. Childhood friends, neighbors, elders. Every gaze carried judgment, curiosity, resentment. And in the center of the crowd stood Mr. Hui. He looked calm, composed, as if the scene was a gathering arranged for his convenience. His hands were clasped behind his back, his spine perfectly straight. There was no shame in him, only certainty. An elder stepped forward, voice deep and stern. Lin, Mai, step closer. The two of them stood side by side, the ground beneath their feet cool and firm. The elder continued, "The matter has reached every household. Your situation is no longer private. The village needs answers." Whispers rippled around them like waves. Every breath felt cold. Mai opened her mouth to speak, but Lin gently touched her hand, stopping her. For the first time in weeks, the mother lifted her head fully. Her eyes were clear, strong, unwavering. "Before you judge us," Lin said, "you must hear the truth, not the rumors, not the pieces you have twisted into shame, but what has been taken from us, and what we have endured." The crowd fell silent. Even Mr. Hui's expression shifted, just slightly, like a ripple disturbing still water. Lin took a slow breath. Her voice became steady, controlled. "Years ago, when my husband fell ill, I went to Hui for help. He provided medicine. But he also demanded something else in return, something no woman should ever be forced to give." Gasps stirred through the crowd. But Lin was not finished. "He did not stop at me. He set his eyes on my daughter as she grew. He watched her as if she were a seed he had planted. He made sure we stayed bound, through debts, through reputation, through quiet threats that left no proof but pressed on us every day." I felt her mother's hand tighten in hers. A quiet strength passed between them. But before Lin could reveal what she had tried to tell Mai earlier, what Mr. Hui had taken, she stopped. Her eyes locked with his, and something unspoken shifted in the air. Mr. Hui stepped forward, his voice smooth and soft. "You speak of force, Lin, but everyone here knows that what you call obligation is simply gratitude. I supported your family when no one else would. Everything that followed was agreement. You accepted. You stayed. You allowed it. You raised your daughter under my care. Now you call it suffering, only because others have begun to speak." His tone was calm, but it struck like a blade. The crowd murmured. Uncertainty, confusion, conflict. Mai felt heat rise in her chest, not shame, but anger. A deep, burning anger that had waited too long to breathe. She stepped forward. "This is not gratitude. This is ownership. And you know it." The crowd hushed again. But Mr. Hui only smiled slightly, like someone who believed he could not lose, like someone who held a secret no one else knew. He turned to the elders. "Tell them," he said. The oldest council member hesitated. Then, with a weary breath, he spoke. "Hui has legal guardianship rights over both Lin and Mai, signed by Lin's husband before his passing, in exchange for medical assistance. The documents are sealed and approved. Everything that occurred is bound under law and witnessed. No one here can challenge it." Every sound disappeared. It felt as if the world itself stopped moving. Mai looked at her mother. Her mother looked at the ground. The truth she had tried to speak earlier suddenly took shape. Not just debt, not just control, but ownership written into law. Their lives, their bodies, their futures, signed away. Mai's knees almost weakened, but she did not fall. Instead, she took one slow breath, because now she understood. This was not the end of their humiliation. This was just the beginning of the fight. Before she could speak again, another sound cut through the night, a single scream, from the direction of their house. Everyone turned. Something was happening there. Something urgent. Something unexpected. Something that would change everything again. Mai and Lin ran. The village followed. Torches lit the path behind them. The river wind howled. The scream echoed again. Closer now. From inside their home. Mai reached the door. She pushed it open and saw the one person they believed was gone forever, standing in the center of the room, breathing, alive, waiting. The world stopped once more, and the next moment was about to decide everything. The room was dim, lit only by the flicker of a single oil lamp. Shadows stretched long across the walls, and in the center of those shadows stood a man who should not have been alive. Mai's breath caught. Lin staggered forward. Her hand covered her mouth as if the world had broken open beneath her feet. It was her husband, thin, pale, weary, but unmistakably there. His clothes were worn, the fabric torn and patched. His face was gaunt, but his eyes, those eyes, held the same gentle depth Mai had known in her childhood. The man the village had buried in memory. The man they believed had died in debt, illness, and despair. The man whose absence had condemned both mother and daughter to the chains they now carried. He was here, standing, breathing. Mai's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Father," she whispered. Her voice trembled not because of fear, but because of something raw and aching, like a wound reopening. Lin took one step toward him, then another, before her knees weakened and she sank to the floor. Tears rolled down her face freely, silently, like something sacred had cracked open. The man knelt, placing his hand on Lin's shoulder. He did not say her name. He did not need to. Years of suffering lived between them, without words. Then his gaze lifted to Mai. There was sorrow there, but beneath it, something deeper. Resolve. He stood slowly, gripping the edge of the table for balance. The villagers crowded outside the doorway, whispering, gasping, staring in disbelief. Mr. Hui arrived last, stepping through the doorway with a slow, calculated calm. The flickering light cast deep lines across his face. The room thickened with tension. The father spoke first. His voice was hoarse but controlled. "I was not dead. I was taken." Gasps rippled like shockwaves. Lin's hands trembled. Mai felt the world tilt. The father looked directly into Mr. Hui's eyes, and the silence between them was sharp enough to cut. "You promised you would save me. You promised my family would survive. I signed because I believed you. But you did not heal me. You hid me. You kept me half alive so you could own them." The crowd murmured, no longer whispers. Now rage, confusion, disbelief. Mr. Hui did not flinch. "You were dying. I allowed you to live. That document was an agreement. Fair. Legal." The father's voice rose, not in volume, but in clarity. "You do not keep a man alive to use his wife and daughter." Fire flickered in his gaze. Not a fire of aggression, a fire of awakening. The villagers shifted uncomfortably. Some looked ashamed. Some looked frightened. Some watched with interest, waiting to see which side was safer to stand on. Mai stepped closer to her father, though her voice was soft. "Where were you all this time?" Her father turned to her. The answer weighed visibly in his posture. "I was kept away. Not by walls. By fear. By debt. By dependency. By shame. I believed if I returned without paying the cost he demanded, I would ruin you both. I believed silence would protect you. I was wrong." Silence settled like thick smoke. Painful. Heavy. Lin closed her eyes, as if the past years rested on her chest like stone. But before any resolution could form, before confrontation could break or ignite, another voice spoke from the doorway. It was a village elder. "Enough speaking. This matter is no longer a private dispute. It must be judged before the council, before the law, before witnesses." Mr. Hui said nothing. He did not need to. His face remained still, unchallenged. The father did not argue. He simply placed a hand on Mai's shoulder, steadying her. "We will go," he said, "but we will go together." The villagers parted as the family walked out into the night. The path to the council hall stretched long and dark across the fields. Torches glowed like eyes watching them. Wind rustled through the rice stalks, soft but restless. Midway down the path, Lynn slowed. Her breath shortened. Her hand pressed gently against her stomach. I rushed to support her. "Mother, are you all right?" But Lynn's eyes were not on the pain in her body. They were fixed on the horizon, on something approaching. A lone figure, small, barefoot, running toward them. A child who knew them, a child who carried a message. He stopped before them, panting, pointing back toward the village. His words came breathless, trembling. "They are not waiting for the council. They have already gathered. They are coming. They are coming now." I felt the earth shift beneath her feet. The family stood in the middle of the field. The wind blew. The torches burned. The voices of the village began to rise behind them. Louder, closer, fierce. There was no time to choose. Only time to stand. And everything that would happen next hung in that single, fragile moment. The night wind carried the sound of the crowd. Shuffling feet, harsh breaths, voices rising together in something that was no longer curiosity, but unrest. The villagers were not simply coming to witness. They were coming to decide. I felt her pulse in her throat. She stood beside her mother, her father, the weight of their entire history pressed into a single fragile line of footsteps in the dirt. The child who brought the message stared at them, wide-eyed, waiting for someone to speak. Lynn's hand tightened around Mai's, as if anchoring herself to the earth. Her breath rose and fell unevenly, but her gaze was steady now. Steady in a way that only those who have broken and rebuilt themselves can be. The father stepped forward first, placing himself between his family and the approaching crowd. He had no weapon. He had no shield. Yet he stood like a wall formed out of years of regret and the sudden, fierce need to protect what was left. Behind him, I looked toward the village road. The torches flickered as bodies moved, shadows merging into a single force. Whispers had turned into voices. Voices had turned into anger. Anger had turned into something dangerous. Mr. Huey did not yell. He did not rush. He walked behind a crowd with a calmness that spread unease rather than reassurance. His silence was a threat. The village elder finally raised his hand, calling for stillness. The sound died slowly, layer by layer. The elder's eyes were tired. He had watched generations rise and fall. But now he faced something the village had never seen before, a story that forced them to see themselves in a reflection. "This is not a matter of shame," the elder began, though his voice was strained. "This is a matter of truth, and truth must be spoken before judgment is given." But the crowd had already decided something in their hearts. Fear had taken root. Fear of chaos. Fear of dishonor. Fear of seeing power questioned openly. Fear that such a story could happen to any of them. Someone shouted from the back. "They broke tradition. They brought disgrace. If we allow this, everything we live by loses meaning." Another voice responded. "They were forced. You all know it. But you stayed silent when they needed help." The crowd split, not physically, but in belief. One side shouted justice. The other demanded punishment. The noise grew louder. The torches shook. The night trembled. And then, suddenly, Lynn stepped forward. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. She simply spoke, and the chaos fell away like it had been cut with a blade. "You say we brought disgrace. But where were you when I begged for help? When my husband lay dying? When my child starved? When I cried at your doors? You turned your eyes away. You told me to endure. You told me to be grateful. And now, you stand here to judge the consequences of your silence." Her words were clear, sharp, unforgiving. Mothers lowered their eyes. Men shifted uncomfortably. Even the wind seemed to stop to listen. I watched her mother, this woman who had stayed small for so long, now standing with a strength that felt larger than the crowd itself. But Mr. Huey finally spoke. "You speak well, but you speak too late." He looked at the father. "At dawn, the council would decide the fate of your family, and the law is on my side." The father's jaw tightened. He had known this was coming. The elder nodded reluctantly. The gathering began to disperse, uneasily, unwillingly, not satisfied, not resolved, only waiting. The crowd drifted back toward the village. The torches became distant stars in the darkness. Silence settled again. Lynn, and the father remained standing in the middle of the field. The moon rose high, pale and watchful. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, the father turned to Lynn. "There is something I must show you." His voice was quiet, heavy, certain. He led them away from the village path, toward the old storage shed near the river, the one no one had opened for years, the one that belonged to him before everything changed. The lock was old. Rust flaked off when he touched it. He pushed the door open. Inside, the air was still. Dust lay thick across forgotten years. A single wooden chest sat in the corner. The father knelt. His hands shook, not with weakness, but with memory. He opened the chest. Inside was something wrapped carefully in cloth. Soft, protected, cherished. He lifted it. My step closer to see. Her breath caught. Inside the cloth was... But before the object fully came into view, a voice called out sharply from outside the shed. "Stop." The three of them turned, frozen. A figure stood in the doorway. Someone who had followed them. Someone who had seen everything. Someone whose presence changed the meaning of the moment entirely. The moonlight revealed the face, and the truth struck with the force of storm. The father whispered the name. The mother staggered back. I felt her pulse thunder in her ears. The figure stepped forward, and the object in the father's hands began to slip. The figure in the doorway stepped further into the shed. The moonlight stretched across their face, revealing features tight with tension, eyes sharp with something between fear and purpose. It was Hoa, the midwife, the woman who had delivered half the village's children, a woman who had always watched quietly, always known more than she spoke. Her presence struck through the silence like a cold blade. Lynn whispered her name, barely audible. Hoa, but Hoa did not look at her. Her gaze was fixed on the item the father held in his trembling hands. "Do not open it here," she said. Her voice was low, not threatening, but warning. A warning soaked in old knowledge and darker truths. The father clutched the wrapped bundle closer instinctively, as if it were something living. I looked between them, confusion twisting with dread. "What is it?" she asked softly. The father's jaw tightened. His eyes flickered with a grief that had never healed. Before he could speak, Hoa answered in his place. "It is the only proof that can break his hold. Proof that your lives were never his to claim. Proof that he built his power on a lie." The words dropped heavy in the air, thicker than the shadows in the room. I felt her pulse deepen, slow, as if preparing for something that would change everything. But before the truth could surface, the river wind swept the door wider, and a sound carried them through the night. Footsteps, many, approaching fast. Voices, torches. The villagers were not returning to sleep. They were returning to hunt for answers before dawn could force fairness. Hoa's expression sharpened. She stepped closer, her voice urgent but steady. "You cannot stay here. If they see what you carry now, they will destroy it before you can speak. You must hide. Not long. Only until the council meets. Once the truth is spoken, the chains will break." Lynn's breath came shallow. She looked at the bundle, then at her husband. "What truth?" she asked, her voice cracking. The father finally spoke. "The document I signed was not for our lives. It was for something else. Something he stole before any of us understood what it meant." His hands gripped the cloth tighter, as if opening it would tear open every wound he had carried alone. I felt the weight of those years pressing into the space between them. The approaching footsteps grew louder now, voices rising, torches flickering like flames hungry to devour. "We must move," Hoa said. Her tone left no room for refusal. They slipped out of the shed just as shadows spilled into the doorway behind them. Torchlight flashed across the walls. Shouts rose again. "Search everything. They cannot escape." The night became a labyrinth of rice fields and narrow paths. Water glimmered black on the moon, frogs croaking in the reeds. Their breaths were quiet, controlled, but urgent. Hoa led them toward the old shrine near the bamboo grove, a place abandoned, forgotten, swallowed by vines and silence. But as they reached the edge of the grove, Lynn stopped suddenly, gripping her stomach. Her breath broke. Pain twisted her features. I caught her before she could fall. "Mother." Lynn shook her head. Try to stand, try and hold the weight of her body and the unborn life inside. But her legs trembled. Her face grew pale. The father and Hoa exchanged a look heavy with worry that neither spoke aloud. This was not the moment for a collapse. This was not the moment to break. But bodies have no loyalty to timing. I held her mother tightly, whispering steady breaths, grounding her. The voices in the village grew nearer. The father reached for Mai, his voice steady though his heart was breaking. "Listen to me. You must keep going. Whatever happens, you do not let him take you again." Mai shook her head, fear rising. "No, we stay together." But he placed the wrapped bundle into her arms. The weight of it was small, but what it carried was enormous. History, truth, freedom, or ruin. His final words were quiet, but sharp enough to carve themselves into her bones. "This, what is inside, will decide everything. Take it to the council when the sun rises. Do not open it until they are all present. Promise me." Mai's throat tightened. Her voice came out barely a whisper. "I promise." The bamboo rustled. A torch flared nearby. Someone shouted, "They are here!" Time split. Hoa pulled Lynn into the shadows, supporting her weight. The father pressed Mai's shoulders firmly, giving her direction without words. She stepped back, holding the bundle close. The father turned toward the approaching villagers. Steady, unarmed, unafraid. The torchlight reflected in his eyes like a man who had already faced death once and returned. Mai's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. But her feet did not move. Not yet. The villagers burst into clearing. Shouts rose. Accusations. Demands. The father spoke first. His voice did not tremble. "You want judgment. You will have judgment. But not tonight." His words cut through the crowd. And then a sudden, sharp cry came from Lynn's side. Her body bent, her hand pressed tight to her belly. The villagers froze. The night held itself still. The next moment could change everything. Every life, every truth, every outcome. And the choice of who would speak next would decide the fate of them all. Lynn's cry cut through the clearing, sharp and urgent. The villagers stopped as if something had gripped them all at once. Even the torches seemed to flicker slower, like time had shifted into a heavier rhythm. I knelt beside her mother, one hand steadying her back, the other holding the wrapped bundle close against her chest. Her heartbeat matched the tremor in Lynn's breath. The father took one step forward, blocking the crowd's view, his voice steady but firm. "She is in pain. She needs space, not judgment." But judgment was already burning in the eyes of those who stood before them. Hoa moved quickly, checking Lynn's pulse, her breathing, her face. Her voice, though calm, carried weight. "It is not time yet," she murmured, "but stress is pressing her body too hard. She must rest. If she does not, the child may come too soon." Whispers stirred. "Whose child? Is it really his? A curse on the family." Voices layered, merging into something thick and poisonous. Mai raised her head slowly and looked at them. She did not shout. She did not cry. She only spoke with a quietness that felt sharper than any scream. "You judge us because it is easier than judging yourselves." The crowd faltered. No one replied. Her words sank in like seeds falling into deep soil, quiet, but certain to grow. The father's voice followed hers, low and unwavering. "All of you know what happens when poverty enters a home, when illness takes a life, when debt becomes a weapon. You call it fate, so you do not have to look at the cruelty of your own silence." He looked at each of them, not as enemies, but as witnesses forced to confront themselves. But then, Mr. Hui stepped forward. His face was still, unmoved, like none of this touched him. "There is no reason for dramatics," he said. "The council will convene at sunrise. Until then, they will be held under watch. If Lynn requires care, I will provide it, as I always have." The calm in his tone was not kindness. It was ownership. I felt her jaw tighten. Hoa rose, placing herself between Lynn and him. No, she will be cared for by those who stand with her, not by the man who kept her life in chains. Gasps rose. The boundary had been drawn. The elder, caught between authority and the truth cracking open around him, lifted his hand for silence. We do not decide now. We wait for dawn. He nodded toward the villagers. Move them to the schoolhouse. They will stay there tonight. None are to interfere. The crowd shifted, uncertain, restless, but obeying. The schoolhouse was not a prison, but it was not freedom either. It was a holding place, a waiting place. As they walked, Lynn leaned heavily against her steps slow, her breaths uneven. The father stayed close, carrying the weight of his own guilt like another shadow. And she held the bundle tightly beneath her shawl, feeling the shape beneath the cloth. Not heavy, but full of meaning. She did not know exactly what it contained, but she could feel the truth in its presence. A truth that could either save them or unravel everything. When they reached the schoolhouse, torches were placed outside. Guards positioned themselves near the doors. No one spoke to them. Inside, the room was quiet. The wooden floor smelled of chalk and old books. The night air seeped through the open shutters, cool against their skin. Lynn lay down on a straw mat. Her eyes were tired but awake. She watched in silence, something unspoken passing between them. Hoa sat nearby, preparing herbs, cloth, warm water. The father paced the room, each step the measure of a man fighting memory and time. Mai sat near the window, the bundle in her lap. The moon moved slowly across the sky. Hours passed. Then, unexpectedly, Lynn spoke. Her voice was soft, steady, clear. The reason we could not speak before, the reason we lived in silence, it was not because we feared him. It was because there was someone else we were protecting. Mai lifted her head, her breath pausing in her chest. The father stopped pacing. Hoa's hands froze. Lynn's eyes shone not with tears, but with the weight of something that had been carried too long. He did not only take your father's dignity. He took something from us when you were still a child, something we thought we had lost forever. Mai felt the room shrink around her. What did he take? Lynn exhaled slowly, her chest rising with effort. Your brother. The word dropped into the space like a stone into water. Silence broke open. Not loud, not violent, just deep. Mai stared at her mother, eyes wide. Brother. A life. A person. A truth. Someone who existed. Someone who was taken. Someone who might still be. The father sat slowly, his face hollowing with the memory. We believed he died. We buried an empty box because we were told there was nothing to recover. But he did not die. Hui took him, to bind us, to hold us by the throat without ever raising a hand. Mai felt her palms grow cold. The bundle in her lap suddenly felt heavier. What is inside this? She whispered. Her father's voice was low. Proof of who he is, where he was taken, and why Hui fears the truth. The night hung suspended. Outside, the torches flickered. The village slept uneasily. Dawn was approaching. Judgment was approaching. Revelation was approaching. But silent footsteps were already moving in the dark. Someone was coming, not from the village, from the mountain path. Someone who had heard everything. Long before any of them spoke, a figure approached the schoolhouse door, and Mai's breath caught as the shadow fell across the threshold. The footsteps stopped outside the schoolhouse door. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the door opened, slowly, quietly, as though the night itself had led the person there. A young man stepped inside, dust on his clothes, a travel-worn satchel over his shoulder, a tiredness in his eyes that was not weakness, but distance traveled. Mai felt the world narrow to a single point. She did not need anyone to say his name. She knew the shape of his jaw, the way his eyes searched the room, not for recognition, but for belonging. Her brother, alive, grown, changed, but unmistakably blood. Lynn's breath caught not in shock, but in relief, the kind that breaks the body because it has been held inside too long. He knelt beside her, gently taking her hand. No words, only touch long denied. The father bowed his head, shoulders shaking once. Silent, powerful. My step forward, her fingers trembling. The bundle in her lap suddenly made sense. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside lay a small woven bracelet. Frayed, child-sized, once tied around the wrist of a little boy before he disappeared. Her brother looked at it. His breath trembled. His voice, when it came, was quiet. I remembered this, even when I forgot everything else. He didn't speak of what happened to him. He didn't need to. The story of it lived in his eyes. Ho was the first to stand. We cannot wait for the council. Dawn will bring judgment shaped by fear. But now we speak truth. They walked as a family, the villagers waking one by one as they passed. No shouting, no flames, just footsteps and the weight of truth carried steadily forward. At the center of the village, where decisions were made, they stopped. Mr. Huey was already there, as if he had known this moment would come, as if he had been waiting to see whether fear or truth would rise first. His gaze flicked to the young man. A flicker of recognition, a flicker of loss, a flicker of something like regret. But regret that comes too late is only a shadow, never a remedy. The elder stepped forward. "We will not shout," the elder said. "We will not accuse. We will listen." Silence spread, and Lynn began to speak, not with anger, not with trembling, but with clarity. She spoke of what was taken, of how silence is not peace, of how survival is not the same as living. Her words were steady, firm, unbreaking. The father spoke next. His voice was a low river, slow but unstoppable. I held her brother's hand, not tightly, just enough. When the story ended, the village did not erupt. They absorbed, noted, understood. Change does not come with drums or fire. It comes with quiet shifts, when the thing that was hidden is no longer hidden, and the thing that was feared is no longer unspoken. Mr. Huey did not argue. He only lowered his gaze. Power had slipped away, not by force, but by truth. The council did not need to vote. The village did not need to debate. The story had already decided itself. Time passed, but not as a blur, as a slow mending. The family built their home on the edge of the village again, not to hide, but to begin, not where pain started, but where healing could grow. Mai and her brother would sometimes sit under the old tree at dusk, the same place where silence once lived. Now it held conversation, soft laughter, memory that did not hurt to touch. Lynn's health improved, not because the burden was gone, but because it was shared. The father worked the fields again, not as a man paying a debt, but as a man living his own life. Hoa visited often. There are some bonds formed not by blood, but by standing beside someone when the world turned sharp. And the village changed too, slowly, but undeniably. No story truly ends. It simply shifts into the life that follows. But for this chapter, for this journey of pain and return, of silence and voice, of loss and recovery, we close it here, not with dramatic finality, but with a quiet truth. Some families break, some families heal, and some families spend their entire lives learning how to do both.